Well, welcome everybody to Adult Forum. Today it's Conversations About Race. It's about time. Our new episode, we're talking with three of the members who participated in our Be the Bridge study that we did earlier in this fall. And these three members of quite a few actually have been great participants, had great comments and thoughts, and are really doing a lot of good internal work. So I wanted to bring them here so that we could just talk about what it's like to be actively studying and having conversations about race. So welcome to Heather, and welcome to John, and welcome to Matt. So our first question today is, what encouraged you to begin to study about race? And I will invite Heather to answer first.
So a lot of things started with George Floyd, but also I work at Feed My Starving Children. And because of the George Floyd incident, many people began voicing comments online, which was very uncomfortable in many ways, but just talking about things that they had experienced or things that they took issue with about our storytelling, or just different things. And and the white savior complex and Feed My Starving Children maybe is all about just white people trying to make the world better to make themselves feel better, which I don't think is the case, but just kind of a lot of things that were stirred up. And so as my team, the group of people that I work with at Feed My Starving Children, we chose to start reading a book. I'm still here. Austin Channing Brown series, read it as well. It's a fantastic book. Really great to just put you into somebody else's skin and just let you see that perspective. And it's a easy read. There's a lot of books out there that can be really heavy. That one's pretty good. But so we did that as a team and just started having a conversation with ourselves to just start looking at the issue, and started seeing other things online and other book suggestions. And so I read a few others. And then when this came up in the fall, it just seemed like a good fit for that. But just wanted to be more aware and just more knowledgeable about the issue.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. How about you, Matt? What encouraged you to begin studying about race?
Well, it was also the George Floyd protests. That was the first thing that sparked it. It was, I had always kind of thought that, there was racism and things, but things were generally managed. And then it kind of, it was kind of a ray of this, I was just kind of shocked into realizing that something wasn't going on. And then what happened after that is a lot of relatives said, we're talking about it, both religious and not religious. And I thought, well, wow, this is really something that I need to rethink. And, and then so I started listening to some of the things that, like, I read that book by Lenny Duncan, Dear Church.
Yeah.
Said some pretty, it looked like people were pretty unhappy, and one of the big things that, some things are kind of scary, like, the things about the the idea of not having police in Minneapolis, and on with that, and it was kind of what can we do to help, and so I was very concerned about it, and it was I started realizing that we were part of the problem, and that we really that it wasn't the protesters who were really the problem. It was the dominant culture that was the problem, and then which was something I didn't really realize. It was you thought that it was something that had been kind of was under control.
Yeah.
People were content. They weren't at a breaking point for sure, and the whole thing about the police, the whole criminal justice thing with the criminal justice system. I heard little whisperings of that, but I never really realized how big of a problem it is because it's so invisible. And I realized that it was a real problem that is embedded into our society.
Yeah. Thank you. I know you've done a lot of thinking about that, Matt, and it's been fun to read your emails to me as you're working some of this out. So, all right, John, we'll bring you on to answer the same question. What encouraged you to begin studying about race?
So I guess what started it for me would have been our forums, even before this thing broke open, with you and Greg. We were getting kind of into this thing, and I got to tell you, I didn't really get it. I was kind of lost out there, but I was interested, really interested. And then and both you and Greg did such a great job on that, and I just kept wanting to get it, but I might have been in the group that was thinking a little bit like, back then, all people matter, and so then when the George Floyd thing broke open, and I started hearing more stuff, and then all of a sudden I realized, about the whiteness stuff, and our the way we are and the way we visualize stuff, and then when I found out I always thought Minneapolis was so together, and then to find out our police department is a mess, and we're really racially a problem out there. And so then, honestly, I missed a lot of waves before. Like, the Vietnam War stuff, I was just caught in between on that and stuff. And I said, I think I want to jump on this one, I really do, and see where it goes. And then, as Heather mentioned, and reading I'm Still Here, thank you, Pastor. And when the germs are off your book, I'll bring it back. And so, and kind of interesting too was Marie. Marie was like always just a little bit behind me in this stuff. And not that because I was hearing more. That's the only reason she's behind me, because other times she's way ahead of me. But and then to hear somebody that's slightly behind you talking, it's just like fingernails on a chalkboard. It's just too much, And then to sit and watch Marie start to get into it. Marie and I don't think we've ever read the same book, ever. And she goes, geez, I kind of like to read that book of Pastors. And all of a sudden she's whipping out words and stuff and things like that. And I'm going, oh, this is really, really cool. So that's kind of been a little journey. But so I think I kind of overwent my deal on the question. But that was it.
This is great, because I think it's a great example of all four of us could say that we sort of felt like our hearts were in a good place before, but something kind of cracked it open where all of a sudden we realized we didn't know what we thought we knew. And the more we started to investigate, the more we were like, oh my gosh, this is a huge issue that I've been completely ignorant of. And I've completely not wanting to been part of the problem. And the more we've been educated, the more, it's like you're seeing a different world than you were 6 months or a year ago. Which leads into the second question. What in your faith says it's important to study about racial justice? I'll start with you again, Heather.
Yeah, and that, I mean, I think for me, it's just to me, it seems like just such a foundational piece of what our faith is that, love one another as God loved you, and we're all, everybody's our neighbor, the Good Samaritan story, and everything that you hear. And I feel like I've spent, again, from Feed My Starving Children, I've spent a lot of time in Matthew, and when was I in prison, when was I hungry, when was I naked. But it's like who's your neighbor is another huge question that we're asked. And we tend to put ourselves in boxes and change. And so I feel like as Christians, we're called to ask some of these hard questions and look at ourselves and really look at who is our neighbor, and how are we treating them, and what can we do differently, what can we do better.
Yeah.
Differently better. So
Yeah, that's good. And how about you, Matt? What would you say in your faith? Your faith says it's important to study.
Well, that whole thing that, Christianity is a truly universalist religion. There's that whole thing about we're neither Greek nor Jew nor slave nor free, neither woman nor man, but children of the same God. And, but, what does that mean exactly? I mean, is that just something we say, or is that something we do? You know, is that just kind of our faith, or is that how we act? Like James said, if we say to the poor person, be comforted, and then we have them sit at the back of the church, is that really having faith? No. If we say, we're neither Greek nor Jew nor slave nor free, but then we treat people and separate people, and we treat people differently depending on their race. Are we really acting out our beliefs? And that was kind of how I came to it. That kind of our belief in this kind of all-embracing religion kind of rings hollow if we don't try to actively try to, you know, try to make reparations and try to, make or try to, open up, what has separated us.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. John, do you want to share what in your faith says it's important to study about racial justice?
Well, you know what? I think both Heather and Matt said it. You love your neighbor as yourself. How do you want to be treated? And then I realized how I was treated as a white person, and how. So I always would have had an advantage on getting a job or something just because of that. And it wasn't fair. We got to treat everybody equal, and I want everybody to be treated equal. So I hitchhike on both those guys, but you love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah. One of the things that's impressed me really, the words of the prophets, which Jesus echoes, are sort of like, pay attention to the poorest of the poor, the outcast, the widow, the orphan, the ones who are on the margins. That's telling you about your morality as a society, is how you see them and how they're treated. And that you are not worshiping God the way you think you are if you can walk by somebody who's crying out and saying, this hurts, I'm suffering. And you walk by them, just like Matt said, you say, I'll pray for you, and then you leave. And I really heard that in a different way and started to say, this is something I need to pay attention to. This isn't going away. I thought it was getting better. And the minute I realized it wasn't, I realized I had to get in the game as a Christian, to listen to the voices. The third question is, what have you learned from our Be the Bridge study, but also other forums, podcasts, articles, books? What's like the biggest nugget? I'll just say, because we could probably spend 20 minutes talking about everything we've learned. What's one thing that you've learned that's just like really hit home for you? I'll start with Heather again.
Wow. And I knew the question, but yeah, I don't like to encapsulate it in one thing. I guess the thought that came to mind for me on this was just kind of the pervasiveness of it, or I don't know, just how embedded in our culture it really is, and just all of the little things that just make a huge difference. And so yeah, just trying to notice it, identify it, and just work through that, and just reading about just things that we so take for granted, as far as, I mean, how we think of ourselves as people. One of the very first questions of Be the Bridge is, what are 5 adjectives would you use to describe yourself? And, would one of them be white? And it's like, no, why, but if you're not white, then that would be one of the words that you would use, because that's part of your identity and who you are. And we don't think of that as part of our identity, but it still is in every facet of our life. And so, and it's not bad to be a white person, but we do have work to do, and there's things that we need to recognize about ourselves, and just the culture that we've grown up in, and just begin to see some of the things that we see as perfectly normal that really maybe shouldn't be.
Yeah, that's good. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, outside of just that there really is a problem, one of the really surprising things is this whole thing about white fragility.
Mm.
Because I see it, that's what I see most of all, especially even with people who are kind of concerned about the issue, that they don't like, who, I mean, people like don't like being, oh well, that's not me. That's what I hear. Well, I don't like this person talking about that because I don't do that. And I see that even with people I know pretty well, who are concerned about. I mean, they're pretty altruistic people, and they're concerned about social issues. It's something it's really. I mean, it's something that I encounter more than anything else. I mean, just because it's so. It's so hard to. I mean, it's so unrecognized.
Mm.
Sorry, I'm not looking at the camera. Yeah, but it's that was what really kind of struck me, is that I mean, we have to let people like that, like when I see someone walking down the street wearing a mask that says "I can't breathe," that they're not criticizing me. They're just saying they're not happy, and that they're not happy with the system. And I just have to let them say that. And a lot of people would have a hard time doing that, even who really care about racial issues.
Thank you. And John, same question for you. What have you learned from Be the Bridge and other books and articles?
Well, I think the 2 things that come out is lament. How you really want to feel it, you want to know it, you want to be it. Almost takes me back to a book when I was in high school, Black Like Me or something. When I can't believe I even read a book back then. But so about a person that made himself black so he could realize what it is. So we really have to feel it. We got to know it, and that not doing anything is no longer an option. And 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 I guess those are things that just kind of those are the two things that are really I'm really holding on to, that I, I want to be involved enough where I feel it, and that it isn't an option not to be there anymore.
That's good. I was thinking about this, and one of the things that strikes me is this idea that ignorance is like a script. The more you get educated on something, the more you start to see that people who are ignorant are saying the same things. Have you noticed that? They respond in the same way, the white fragility. They'll say things, yeah, but all lives matter. You know, the more you learn, the more you start to see that, and you realize that we're all sort of like, and it's not just racial matters. I'm sure it's on many other things, but we've sort of been fed the most minimum narrative, and then we all have these little parrot talks. And when someone challenges the narrative, we parrot talk back. That's our only defense. And when you break out of that, all of a sudden you can see it, and you're like, oh my gosh, I get it. And it hurts. It hurts to realize you were part of that ignorant narrative. So that's what I've learned, is I've had a lot of moments where just like haven't felt right. And that's just part of the process.
So, Pastor, that's an interesting thing, I think, that what you're talking about, that parrot talk, because I mean, we've been hearing a lot of that in politics too, and it just seems to be what's going on, and it's crazy how people just hold on to something like that and keep going. That's an interesting way to put it. I'm gonna put that in my work bag. Work with that one.
That's good. So the last question is, what do you want Atonement members to know about our role as Christians in racial justice, or maybe our role as a church in racial justice, especially as a vastly white church in a changing suburb? Heather.
Yeah, I think I would just say, we all have things to learn and we all have work that we can do. And this is not something that is us versus them. This is a we. This is a faith community, and this is a Christian global issue. And so there's not an easy answer. It's not easy work. But we all have to start somewhere. And so there's some easier ways than others to dip your toes in the water. Like I said, I'm Still Here is a pretty easy book to start off. I wouldn't necessarily Waking Up White, way heavier, and so just, and talk to some people, try to get some perspective from others who maybe have started this journey. One thing that I learned that was super important is just don't expect people of color to do the work for you and to answer all of your questions and give you the answers, because you really need to experience things and learn things and have this kind of a conversation, because it's just we need to work through this together. And as they said, white people are exhausting. One of the phrases in the book. And so we have work that we need to do, but it's not, we're not bad people. Like I said, being white doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make the world, doesn't whatever. But it just means that we need to recognize what that means and what it means, like I said, what we can do differently and what we can do better.
Yep. Matt, how about you? What do you want Atonement members to know about our role as Christians in racial justice?
I think the biggest thing I think that we need to know is that racial justice is not a superficial issue. It's not one of those things like where you read a comic book and there's good and there's evil and like that. And it wasn't. I recently read a book on Reconstruction, and even back then it really wasn't as simple as we think it was. But now it's more deeper and less superficial than ever. And and it needs, I mean, it needs to be explored, and it's not, these people are bad and these people are good or anything like that. It's much more of a of a of a nuanced issue, and it's not simple.
Yeah. Yep. All right, John, what do you want Atonement to know?
I want Atonement to know that we're not going to leave this issue. Churches, I want us to stand for this. I think it'd be a great thing, great timely thing for Atonement to stand for racial justice, because I think it involves, all the, all about God, everything else like that. But we can all talk. But as James says, show me. And if I was to put my money on something, I would like it to be this. And I've been so appreciative that you haven't taken your foot off the gas pedal when it comes to this. And as far as I'm concerned, I'd like people to know Atonement for their continuous racial injustice. I want Atonement to stand for racial injustice, and so that's all I think it'd be a good thing for our church to have a deal, and I've been real happy that you've done this, and so that's all.
I guess I'll close by saying that whenever I get self-conscious, like someone made a comment a while back, okay, we've had Black Lives Matter on our sign, enough, okay? Take it down, it's enough. And maybe in the media news, Black Lives Matter has diminished a little bit. And I see through white eyes maybe what that looks like on our sign. And then someone who's not white tells me what it means to them to have that on the sign. And all of a sudden I remember, I'm not living in a white neighborhood. I'm not living in a white world. People are seeing this, and they're seeing that a church says that they matter, and that it affects them. That makes them feel important. And the same thing happened. I have a Black Lives Matter sign on my front lawn, and every once in a while I'll have people who are Black or they'll walk by, and you can just sort of see that they're looking at it and they're noticing, okay, here's somebody who's trying. Here's someone who I remember we don't live in a white world, and there are people whose perspectives I don't know much about, and I'm learning, and they see what we do and don't do, especially as a church. They see what we don't say. And I was just recently reading a book where a Black woman went to a mostly white church, and there had just been a huge tragedy. I think it was like the Emmanuel 9 or something, like a huge shooting. And she went to church, and there was no mention of it by the pastor or in the whole service. And I saw myself in that. And I was like, I bet dollars to donuts that after those 9 people were shot in the church that I didn't say much about it at all. And that person decided to leave the church after that because it didn't feel seen. It didn't feel like it mattered that their people were being gunned down in the streets, in a church, wherever with, so I guess for me, the work continues. I'm still learning. I'm still realizing things within myself, and I hope that we can all humbly do that journey together.
Okay, so we're going to name Atonement Black Lives Matter Church.
Are we?
And I'm gone.
Yeah, all right.
Okay. I'm John out. See ya, guys.
All right. Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.